You saying this is putting a new perspective, particularly this concept of the fan himself, is putting a new perspective for me on, taking a look at social media, where social media stands. More than anything, it's people are labeling themselves on really, truly arbitrary things. How many likes they have, how many friends they have on something that platform's so not real. I'm a software developer, so I actually know what the code and the database structures actually look like that create a social network. And it's code. It's completely abstract. There's nothing there, and yet these people are basing their whole lives on it. And then we see, it makes sense to me now that the social media platforms would be cracking down on people like you, on people like us, trying to remove any thought that, oh, hey, you're bigger than what's going on your little profile and the people attached.
Exactly.
What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I mean, everything is an expression of everything else. So the bigger picture expresses itself in the apparently mundane. So let's take this perception and this hijacking of focus, even on the mundane everyday level that we see now. I was born in 1952. I was born into a very different world, really, to the one we live in now. And in those days, you spoke to people, expansion, looking outwards. You talked to people. You had conversations with people. And there was a lot of discourse because there wasn't the technology to hijack that discourse. Okay, so people did look more outward then. Now, where are vast numbers of people looking every day? There.
Their phone.
There.
Yeah.
Now, what is that but the hijacking of focus and the concentration of focus on one dot? How on earth are we going to connect the dots to see the picture, the tapestry? Whoa, that's what's going on when we're focused on a dot, and that's all it is. And you see, what's happened here? This has been a long unfolding story. This is not happening randomly. This is not happening by chance. This is a long unfolding story. I explain it in the new book very clearly. What has been happening is that the internet was created by and through this technological development arm of the Pentagon, DARPA, right, to be the means through which humanity received its information. Information leads to what? It leads to perception. So we had newspapers, we had local newspapers, we had national newspapers, and we had local radio stations in Britain and what have you that were at one time independent. But what's happening now is the media is being vastly concentrated in terms of power to the point now where it's a handful of corporations owning the lot, but also it's being moved. It's being moved away from mass communication we had before in terms of television and newspapers, and it's being focused on the internet. And therefore, it's allowed giant corporations, I would strongly suggest, controlled by DARPA, etc., like Facebook, like Google, increasingly Twitter. Sure. And it's focused where people get information from in the hands of a few corporations on the internet through the phone. So this has now given them power because you cannot algorithmically censor a newspaper or these other forms of media, right, censored as they were, yes, but you can't do it algorithmically. Now you can. Now you can control what people see and don't see simply via codes without any human involvement. And this is what we're seeing now. It's basically been this. Make the sources of information in the hands of a few corporations on the internet, and once you are closing in on a monopoly, then you start censoring what people can and cannot see. You make sure it's a private corporation, because then when people complain about the war on freedom of speech and the fairness of communication, they say it's a private corporation, we can make our own rules. And in two major ways, that area of the United States that I call the devil's playground, others call it Silicon Valley, is being used in two major ways to further hijack human perception and control the information they receive, thus hijacking human perception, and also leading through to the ultimate goal, and it's been the goal all along, as I explained in the new book, and that is of connecting the human mind, the human brain, to AI, so that instead of manipulating perception, as they have done up to this point, artificial intelligence becomes the perception, which is now what people like Kurzweil are openly talking about.
Interesting. Yeah, I had a recent conversation that, like you're saying, I had not even realized that at the point at which we are actually not seeing with our eyes, which is what it is that people are talking about, where it's actually, we're perceiving something in our ocular, through our ocular stem that's actually coming from somewhere else. The question becomes like, do we have agency at that point? Like, it's gone. It seems that we'd be able to be completely controlled from birth. We're talking about the Matrix at that point. So let's. I want to get into while we have the time still. I want to get into the book. First, I want to talk about why you decided this particular book. Why was this the time? And I mean, provocative title: Everything You Need to Know, Everything, but Have Not Been Told. I don't want to give away, obviously, too much of the plot, but if you could walk us through a little bit, what made you decide to sit down and put this one together, and then what's the basic synopsis?
Well, two things. First of all, I've been on a world speaking tour since the summer of 2016. There have been all-day events. I've just finished them. I'm going to start evening events now around the world and around Britain in the spring. And I've seen very clearly that what I've been talking about and others have been talking about over the years, which is this coming awakening, it's happening. It doesn't seem like it often because they don't talk about it on the mainstream media. But going around the world, in cultures of different kinds, in countries of different kinds, I've seen this awakening, not just in terms of numbers, but the kind of people that are now saying, hold on a minute, I'm going to look at this world again because this makes more sense to me. Or I'm going to ask questions because this world doesn't make sense to me anymore. And so I've written the book. There's an enormous amount of new information in it for people who've read my previous books. Because as you open your consciousness, open your mind and let infinity in, understanding just goes on accumulating. But it's also written for people who are just saying, what's it all about? What is going on? I'm feeling really uneasy about the world as it is. So what's actually going on? So it's written at that level as well. And in terms of the title, and I explained the title before the book starts, Everything You Need to Know But Have Never Been Told. It's obviously not everything you need to know, every last dotted I, crossed T and syllable. What I'm saying is everything you need to know to look at the world events, reality, nature of self-identity in a completely different way. Because what I'm doing is not sitting cross-legged on a mountain saying, I'm going to tell you everything and you just have to listen to me and then that's all you need to do. No. I mean, the last thing we need is anyone else standing up and saying, I know it all, listen to me. It's about encouraging people and showing them the evidence to break through what I call the postage stamp consensus in the book. If you look at a human life, it is downloading the postage stamp consensus from cradle to grave. And what I mean by postage stamp is a tiny, tiny explanation of everything. And it's so myopic in terms of its sense of the possible. It's again laughable. But on that postage stamp stands mainstream science, mainstream medicine, mainstream politics, all the parties, no matter what they are, mainstream media, all of them, and mainstream education, mainstream academia. So you come out of the womb, your parents have been through the process you're about to go through, and they are now passing on postage stamp consensus reality to you as if it's real. You then very quickly now go into school, and an authority figure representing the state is giving you the postage stamp consensus of everything. All the way through your formative years. If you want to pass your exams and be successful academically, you have to accept what you're told and repeat it for the system to give you a tick and a degree or whatever. You then go out with this postage stamp consensus perception out into the institutions of media, of academia, of politics, of corporations, of banking, of medicine, all the rest of it, science. And you take with you this core perception of reality I call postage stamp consensus. Now all these different institutions are confirming to each other that the postage stamp consensus is how things are. If a journalist is doing a story on health, he'll go to a doctor to get postage stamp consensus. He won't go to an alternative practitioner who may have had fantastic success in treating what the article's about. If he wants to know about reality, or they'll go to a scientist who'll give them postage stamp consensus on the nature of reality, which is a nonsense. He won't come to someone who's studied it from an open-minded point of view for decades and decades and decades. So you then are going through your life with the 24/7 media giving you postage stamp consensus versions of everything. And at the end of that, you drop into a hole in the ground or whatever, having completed a lifetime of downloading a nonsensical, myopic version of everything. And is it any wonder, therefore, that people have their perceptions hijacked for life? And what also happens, of course, the other big part of this tyranny, this perceptual tyranny, is that those who've accepted the postage stamp as their reality then give a hard time, ridicule or abuse to all those who are questioning the postage stamp and stepping off it. I mean, I stepped off it a long time ago and I started sprinting, and I'm still sprinting because it's a nonsense. And when you step off it and you look at the evidence that's there but never gets into that mainstream myopia, it's incredible what is already known about things that people never ever hear about. So what I'm doing in the book is saying, hey, look at all these other explanations for all the things you've been told about before, and look at all the evidence to support the fact that you've been lied to all your life. And it has an incredible effect on people, because suddenly the walls come down and people see for the first time what's actually been all around them all along, but they've not seen because their focus of attention has been focused on the postage stamp perception of everything. You don't become a teacher unless you teach the postage stamp. You don't become an academic unless you teach the postage stamp. You don't become a doctor unless you treat according to the version of health of the postage stamp, etc., etc. This is why it's a tyranny. It's a tyranny of perception, and we have to challenge it. And that's what I've been doing for 30 years, and that's what I'll be doing for a long time yet.